Hello, I'm Penny Foy, and welcome to my quilt room. I would like to talk a little bit about quilts, what they are and what they aren't, and a brief history of quilting. I'm not going to go into all of the history, that would be impossible because there's so much of it. But I would like to begin with the word quilt actually came from the Latin word colchita. Now, colchita in Latin means mattress or cushion, and that's because quilts are layers. It's 3 layers. And I have an example here. You have your top layer, and this one is pieced. So you have a pieced top layer. You have your batting, or some places will call it wadding, is your center layer. And then you have a back piece of fabric. So it's a fabric sandwich of sorts. Then your quilting would actually be the stitches that holds everything together. After you do your quilting, then you would put a binding on it, and this particular piece, when finished, would be used as a wall hanging. So that's a little bit about what a quilt is. Now, quilting has been around since 3400 BC. Now, as far as in Europe, the introduction of quilts, it was when the Turks came in during the Crusades. They wore clothing that was quilted, which would make sense when you think about it because it would be thicker. It would provide warmth during the winter, as well as protect them from the sharp edges of the armor that they were wearing. So as we continue forward, quilts were used for different reasons. If someone had a lot of money, they would do whole cloth quilts. Now the quilts would be one color of cloth, but it would still be in strips because manufacturing hadn't gotten to the point of being able to have one large piece of cloth for a quilt. However, these were very expensive to do, and the showcase of these items would be the stitch work, and the stitch work would be extraordinary. There were some of these that were brought to the colonies in the early days, but very rarely. During early colonial times, quilts were more patchwork. They were leftover shirts when children outgrew nightgowns, or shirts had holes in them that couldn't be mended. They would take these items and they would make quilts out of them. Blankets with holes in them would be used as the batting. And the blankets would normally be wool, and this would create a warm covering for the beds for the family to be warm. So it was a necessity at one point. Then it became very expensive for quilting in the later colonial era, and the fabric became more expensive and more extravagant. And it was only those who had more money and more wealth who actually had time to do the quilting. If we move forward to the 1930s, people would go to the feed store and buy flour and sugar, feed for the animals, seed for the field. And they had to change the way, instead of tin cans and wooden boxes that wasn't very efficient, to hold the goods in. So then they came up with feed sack. Initially, the feed sack was not printed, and what the farmer would do would put his mark on the feed sack and bring it back to have it refilled. Well, the women of the time would then take the feed sacks, and instead of it going back to be refilled, they would use it for diapers, for dishcloths, and a myriad of other reasons that they could find around the house, because fabric was so useful then, and it was very hard to come by. So then what they did, the manufacturers got smart, and this is where you have the feed sack fabric collections that you will see today, reproductions, and I have a few here. So then, as husbands would go and get their feed, wives would normally send a list of what it was that they would need. Instead of, okay, not only do we need flour and sugar, I need a yellow fabric to match this, or I need a purple fabric to match this dress, or this quilt. And they would make their washcloths, their dresses, they would make shirts and all sorts of things out of these feed sacks. And it was so popular that even today, as you see, they have feed sack reproductions. Now, today, as we go forward, we see that we have quilted fabric. The fabric is already quilted for you. Today, this is used a lot for people who maybe don't have time to quilt and they want to make a quick purse, or they want to make a computer case or something of that nature. This is something they can do quickly and easily. And technically, if you put a binding on it, you could call this a quilt. You have your top fabric, you have your batting, and you have your second fabric. So you have 3 layers. Let's go back to the history though. I have been passed down a quilt that I would like to share with you quickly. And this quilt was made by my cousin's great-grandmother. This quilt is in between 80 to 100 years old, and because she did not put the date and time stamp on it, normally women who make quilts will put a little block in the corner that says when it was made and who made it. This one doesn't have that, but it has been passed down from great-grandmother to grandmother to father to son and now to me, and it's one of my treasures. This quilt has been passed down with love and has been taken on picnics and has such a family history. And that's the other thing about quilts. Not only are they historic in how they shaped America and our founding and the usefulness of them, but also the memories and how they were used. So as we go forward on this journey and we look into more how quilts are created and how they're made, and you see all of the work that's put into them, you will see the care and the diligence and the love that's put into each piece as it is sewn, as it is placed, and as it is quilted. I hope that you will enjoy taking this journey with me as we continue over the next few weeks. Thank you.